Hi, I'm Bob Tabor with www.learnvisualstudio.net, and this is another cheat sheet review session covering videos 25 through, I guess, 29 or so. All right, so let's go ahead and add to what we previously had here, looking at lesson number 25, talking about some of the additional common controls in Zamel. Looked at the time picker. We noticed that it had a special clock identifier that allowed us to create AM PM versus military time clocks for selection. The calendar date picker, which just showed a little representation of an area that can be selected, and then you click on it and it will actually show a flyout with a menu or with a calendar on it. You can choose the placeholder text in that little area that you click on or tap on. Then we looked at the more full-featured calendar view, and this allows us to make single or multiple selections for a calendar. Here I show how to handle the selected date changed event and show in a text block all of the selected dates using this little link statement here that projects out the month and the day. It puts it in an array and then joins them together with a comma. Next, we looked at the flyout menu, and we applied it to a button, but we said we can apply it to lots of different things. And actually, just the flyout in this particular case, it just would allow us to create a little a dialogue on screen. We can put anything we want to in that dialogue. I think I styled it up with a stack panel, a label, or rather a text block and a button, and we can hide it once it's actually shown by handling an event like a button inside of that flyout and just call myFlyout.hide, if whatever the name of the flyout that you've created. The corollary to this is the flyout menu, which I just accidentally said a moment ago, and this allows you to create a contextual menu from, again, any control. I just happen to show it with a button. You can create not only flyout menu items and handle the click or tapped event, which I'm not displaying here. You can create a separator to create visual separation of the line between items. You can create a submenu by using the menu flyout sub item element, or you can create a toggle menu item by choosing the toggle menu flyout item. And I also again point out that this little technique of the flyout or the menu flyout can be applied to many different types of controls. You can learn more about it at that URL. All right, next up we talked about the Autosuggest Box, and this was pretty neat, and we're going to use this here in an upcoming challenge. Here we have the we can change the query icon by default. We set it to we set it to a little magnifying glass, the find query icon. We also changed the placeholder text. But the real power is in this text changed event handler, which we handle here, you can see. This time we're just going to go against a simple array of strings, and we filter it using a where link clause. Then we add those items to an array and set them as the item source for our Autosuggest box. And that, as we type additional letters, it will reduce the number of options. Then we can use the arrow keys to select one of the items. Then I'm just going to paste these three in together, even though they're not necessarily related. We looked at the slider control, which is used often in the settings panel in Windows 10. The progress bar, where we can set the maximum and the minimum, or I'm sorry, just the maximum for the progress bar. Here I created a binding statement. We'll talk about xbind a little bit later. We bound it to the slider value so that when we move the slider, we were also moving the progress bar. If we didn't want to do that, we could just manually set the value attribute of the progress bar in C# or whatever. And then finally showed the progress ring, and we can turn on that progress ring by setting is active to true, or we can stop it and no longer display it, setting it to false. All right, next up in the next lesson we talked about the ScrollViewer, and this is going to be a crucial item as well. It allows us to add a number of items that are that don't display in the current window size, and give us scrolling ability horizontally and vertically to look around that window. So here I'm setting the horizontal scroll bar visibility to auto, but you can also say hidden or always on. And then I said you can put anything you want to inside the scroll viewer, but the scroll viewer cannot be inside of a stack panel. If you put it inside of a stack panel, it won't do anything at all. Okay. Next up, we talked about the canvas and shapes. Let me just paste in the first couple. Well, let me just paste in the whole thing here. And I just wanted to cover this for the sake of completeness. The canvas allows you to do absolute positioning via attached properties. So unlike the relative panel or even the grid and the stack panel, the canvas is for absolute positioning. We said typically that's not a great thing, a great way to use it, but it does have its uses, especially when combined with some of the line, the rectangle, the ellipse, for doing drawing or any kind of diagramming or anything that has a visual component to it. Showed you how to use the line. The line, we could actually utilize this outside of the canvas, but the polyline, you'll notice that we used the canvas to set the top and the left hand corner as an offset, and then filled in the points, XY point positions, in order to create a triangle. And then also we talked about the rectangle and ellipse. I think we've used those before in this series, just didn't really talk about them. Then finally talked about the canvas's attached property called z-index, and essentially if you think about everything we're looking at is flat, but what if we were to turn it 3D and then we were able to see the order in which things were stacked and kind of sitting on top of each other? That's what z-index does. The higher the number, the higher up in the stack it is, the more it covers. Okay. And next up we talked about Zamel Styles. First of all, we started by just looking at resources. We created, like, for example, a solid color brush, gave it a key, and then set its particular attribute, in this case the color. And so we can use this everywhere that we want to use this accent color of brown, just by referencing the key. And then if we need to change that color from brown to red in the future, nothing changes. All we got to do is just change it in one little spot here, and it changes it for the entire application. Styles are kind of like those resources on steroids. They allow us to set multiple attributes all at once by giving it a key and identifying a target type. So this particular style is generated specifically for a button. Now the way that you actually apply these things is through a binding statement, and the binding statement will look like this, where you have the open and closing curly braces, the word static resource, and then the name of the resource. So it could be the style key or the resource key, my brush or my button style. And then we talked about creating these resource dictionaries at multiple levels, at the page, at the application, but then also we said you could create a resource dictionary file. I showed you how to do that by going to the project, add new item, and then resource dictionary was one of the options there. So we added a new file called dictionary1.zamel, and then we defined a solid color brush there and used it in our application. And the way you use it is to merge those resource dictionaries that you define together. In this case, not only did I add the dictionary1.zamel to this particular page, but then also one I'm not displaying on this cheat sheet called dictionary2, and then I can, in the rest of the page, reference any of the styles that were created either at the page, the application, or any of the two resource dictionaries that we have. And resource dictionaries, again, help us manage lots of styles. We can reuse them in multiple projects. They're great for organization, things of that nature. And then finally, we just talked about themes. Let me give you a nice URL for learning more about theme resources. Essentially, if you find something that is a binding statement with theme resource, you can take a look at that style by putting your mouse cursor on it, hit F12, and that'll open up a file called generic.zamel. And so we saw where there were a couple of different styles that we could choose from that would allow us to utilize the colors, the theme colors that were selected by the user, whether on the desktop or the phone or even an Xbox One. In addition to that, we can also request a theme. We saw how by default our application requests the light theme, but we changed it to dark and saw what the impact was. However, in all cases regarding themes and styles, high contrast themes will override because it's really a usability issue. Finally, we talked about the fact that there are lots of different themes, not just for colors, but then also for things like font styles. And so to illustrate this, we went to the properties window, went to the style property, clicked the little designer. It popped open a contextual menu that allowed us to select from several styles that were predefined. We chose the header text block style and some of the others, and we saw how now it shared this, our text block shared the same style as other items that we would see typically in Windows 10. And then finally, many of the styles that were defined in the generic.zamel had this based on attribute that kind of created a baseline style, and then there would be styles that derive from that style based on that original style, and then add or change some of the attributes. So it's very much like cascading style sheets in a sense. And if you're familiar with that in web development, this should feel pretty similar. Okay, so quick review. Hopefully all those concepts make sense, and we're moving on and continuing to add complexity. You're doing great. Hang in there. I don't know that we're about halfway done yet, but we're getting close. All right, so we'll see you in the next lesson where we start moving on to some advanced content. See you there. Thanks.